Well, hello and welcome into the vault. Hope everybody's doing great on a Friday night. I am. It's much better weather here. I can tell you that already. It's improved greatly from earlier in the week. But anyway, it's good to have you in. It's a good Friday night. We've got the work week behind us, and we're ready to jump into some gaming this weekend. I know for me, I'm excited about it because this is the first time my in-person group's going to get together since I don't know. It's been about a month now because of the weather and illnesses and things like that. So it's good to get everybody together and finally break up some boredom. All right. So that's the intention anyway. So looking forward to all that. Hey, Mark. Good evening. Hey, Mark. I made a change in my settings that I think may have improved the latency a little bit of chats. Do you mind testing that out for me real quick? Because I think it may have improved some. Yeah, that seemed a lot quicker. Yep. Good. Well, so anyway, I wanted to talk about a few things before we got too into tonight. I do want to jump in and talk about meta currencies later on in the show because that's kind of the topic of the night, and I got a few things to say about it. So hopefully you'll stick around for that. But first I just want to say thanks everybody that has been watching my shows and the shorts and videos, and especially the one that I released earlier this week for the encounter autopsy. Seems like it's gotten some good traction. So if you've watched it, thanks. If you liked it, then thanks even more. If you want to see more things like that in the future, then please let me know. I had a fun time making it. Took me forever, but I did have a good time making it, and I'd like to do more of that in the future, right? But anyway, if you're enjoying things here on the vaults, then please subscribe to me if you haven't already, and give the live stream a like if you're having a good time. But this week I've been kind of piddling around at night looking at some virtual tabletops, and I kind of just wanted to bring that up a little bit because I've been trying to find something that I can use to kind of break up things in between whenever our in-person group can't meet in person, something that we may be able to use to link up anyway, because we are separated by a little bit of distance. So sometimes if we can't travel, it might be nice to get together online. So one of the limitations on that was one of my players is limited because of his vision difficulties, is limited to using an iPad. And while researching that, I've found that very few VTTs, and by VTT I'm talking about virtual tabletops, very few of them offer native, not just mobile, but native tablet support, and that's surprising to me. Now, a lot of them do offer, they're web-based and you can get to it in the web, but they don't necessarily support the tablet features like pinch zooming and the different commands that you can use on that to improve your experience. And I've only found one that has a dedicated mobile app, right? And that was Quest Portal. So I've been looking at Quest Portal quite a bit. It's a trade-off. You get the mobile support that it has, but it's not nearly as robust as some of the other ones. Hey Kathy, welcome in. And the two big ones out there are Foundry and Fantasy Grounds, and those are actually probably the worst supported on a mobile platform. They just aren't optimized for it very well. The rest of them that are web-based, more web-based options, at least you can use it through Safari or something like that. But anyway, I've been surprised by the lack of support and really I can't believe somebody as prolific as Foundry has not been able to address that yet. But hey, whatever. The search goes ever on and on, right? But we'll land on something. There's Owlbear Rodeo is out there, which is not too bad. It's very bare bones, but it can get the job done. But we'll see what we can figure out. But also Tuesday we took a look at the quick starter for Oathhammer, and we went through that. I picked that up off of DriveThru. I liked it so much, I went ahead and went all in on it and got the hardback and the PDF for it, and hopefully that will be here pretty soon. But the reading through the PDF of the full version, it's as good as I had hoped. It's got a lot of great content in there, and it really just expands on and improves on what we looked through in the quick start. The rest of the classes that are available are fantastic. After reading the rules all the way through, it is very much a melding of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th Edition and Forbidden Lands, because it's taking a lot of the races and some of the professions and then welding that into a dice pool system, which works surprisingly well. But we may take a look at that I think I'm gonna do that. I think I'm gonna do a deep dive standalone video to go into that, because I think it's worth it. It's really a great system. But the thing about it that is cool is that it offers domain play essentially right at the start of the game. You end up if you're into that kind of thing, it's really amazing. I like how they integrated that into the gameplay from the very beginning, and you don't have to kind of wait until your higher levels where most people quit playing by then, right? But the included setting I'm not sold on yet. I need to read through it in more detail. It's a little generic for me, maybe, but I'll give it a fair read through, and you can see what you think whenever I show it to everybody on the full video of it. But the other thing about Oathhammer, as I was reading the background on it, I found that it was a Kickstarter that happened roughly mid-year in 2025. And they delivered on that with full production and shipping within like 2 months of the end of the Kickstarter. It's crazy. I haven't seen anything like that. I was quite impressed by how they handled that. And it seems like most of the backers were too. And, that contrasts quite a lot with, in here, I'll bring it up and show you, but see here. There we go. So this is Broken Empires RPG by Me, Myself, and Die, which is a YouTube channel here. And I backed this, and it concluded at the end, like I think it was October of 24 was whenever it funded on Kickstarter. And man, I was pumped for this. It's a D100 skill-based system, but it had great systems that they were talking about putting in there, and being full featured with all kinds of journeying and downtime and realm building and everything that you possibly want. All the things that kind of hit, check all the boxes for me. And the art style and the setting that they were going to be coming out with on it were really intriguing and interesting, and the adventures that were going to be released with it, all of them just spot on great, right? And they gave an intimation that it was practically ready. They just needed to do the Kickstarter. Well, here we are in 2026. We don't even have a PDF yet. We don't even have a PDF of the core rules. And, the excuses are, of course, that they don't have all the art in, and this, that, and the other. And honestly, I at this point, I couldn't care less. Give me a PDF of the core rules with the missing art blocked out or something like that at this point, because they kind of need to release something to let people know that they've got a product, right? And this is kind of a general problem I've had with Kickstarter for a while now is everybody has a lot of excuses, right? And you'll have the Kickstarter apologists on there talking about how, this isn't this is not a sure thing, and this is not, you're not guaranteed, all this other kind of stuff, and which is fine and dandy, and I understand that. But at the same time, they are, a business that is trying to attract and keep customers. And the way that you do that is you meet your promises, right? So, needless to say, I'm disappointed in this, and it got a ton of press at the time. All the channels on YouTube that I watch were talking about it and interviewing the author, and from all the Shadow Dark people and Professor DM and all of the regular crowd were hyping this up pretty big, and I bought into it, and I'm still looking forward to it. And if they come out with a stellar product, I'll be all in, and I'll let you know, and I'll tell you that they came out with a real banger. Okay. But that really doesn't excuse kind of the business practices here. I don't think they've been completely forthcoming on this, but excuse me, I'm not behind the scenes. There may be some crazy stuff going on. They may have had problems, but regardless, everybody in life has their own problems, but you got to live up to your promises. But anyway, that's kind of how I feel about that. Now, I guess we should probably go ahead and consider jumping on over and talking about the meta currency stuff, right? So let me get that set up in the background now. Before I jump into the presentation, some of you might not be familiar with what meta currencies are, and I think I should probably spend some time talking about that, just a couple minutes, and explain it. So, in a role-playing game, in that context, a meta currency it is points or things that you can spend as a player or as a game master. It's a pool of points or tokens or whatever, and so you can spend this in game to accrue certain benefits or be able to affect the game rules in a certain way. And those are usually earned either by default in certain circumstances, just per session, or it can be earned through gameplay. But regardless, it's something that is transactional during a session, right? So you get a number of these at the start of your game session, and you're able to spend these and acquire them. And, it's like trading back and forth with the Monopoly bank almost, right? And, I've seen these used to good effect in some cases, but in most cases, I have not really been impressed by how they play out at the table. And I'll explain this in more detail here in just a second. But I did want to kind of just get the basics out of the way of what they are and how they're used in general. Mark says, not the first nor will it be the last Kickstarter that fails to deliver on all their hype. Yeah, amen, right? Amen, brother. It's I mean, I've had a couple of complete duds that I've backed, and I've had a couple of really great ones that came out of it too. So, and then there's been a whole lot in between. But there's been some pretty infamous Kickstarters over the years, and luckily I have not been part of any of the really bad ones. But the ones that have ended up as duds for me have been fairly, a minor spend. So it wasn't too big of a hit. Okay, so let me share up here. All right, I'm gonna touch on 3 different systems where I have used meta currencies and actually seen them in play on the table, and kind of touch on how I feel about each of them, where they went wrong, and what I've done to kind of to mitigate it. So the first one let's talk about is going to be Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Now, I have played this game extensively. We've played it a lot. We did the full Enemy Within campaign, like a couple years long, took us to finish it. So we've got a lot of experience in this, right? So in Warhammer, in the rules as written, you have 4 different meta currencies, and in 2 of them are linked together, right? And I've got those organized here in columns. So starting with fate, the number of fate points that you have is determined at the beginning of the game, and usually by what species that you select will tell you the spread of fate. So you get a number of fate and resilience points then, and it's usually like a total of 5 or so, roughly split between fate and resilience. And then let's assume that you have 3 fate points. Then that also dictates how many fortune points you have. And the same thing on resilience and resolve. So if you have 3 fate points, then each session you also have 3 fortune points that you can spend during the session that refreshes at the beginning of the next session. And likewise with resilience, if you have 2 resilience points, then you also have 2 resolve points, and the resolve points are spent during the session and refresh session to session. Now, fate and resilience at the top, they are permanent burns. If you use them, you burn them, and it reduces your fortune and so forth, and you don't get them back except for like extraordinary adventuring, right? So fate has a couple of uses: die another day and how did that miss. So they're essentially ways to cheat death, right? So die another day means you just kind of get knocked out and you survive the encounter. How did that miss? It makes a killing blow miss you for whatever reason, but yet you're still in the combat. And then resilience, if you burn that, then you're able to do the I deny you and I will not fail. I deny you being you can ignore a rolled corruption whenever you reach a certain amount of corruption in the game. So that way you can avoid like physical mutations and stuff like that. And then the I will not fail allows you to essentially dictate the number that you roll on the D100 so that you can strike a specific location, get an automatic crit, different things like that. And then you can see below there on Fortune and Resolve, they each do have several different uses, right? So you can re-roll failed tests, add success levels to a test after it's rolled. You can change your initiative for fortune points. Okay, so having said all that, that already is kind of a lot to remember and a bit confusing, right? So players will hoard their points on fate and resilience and not spend them unless they absolutely have to, which is a good thing. But then you get into the fortune and resolve. Most of my players never even paid attention to the resolve points. They didn't spend them or really look at how they could be used or understand them at all, besides like one player. And then for fortune, they almost without fail, they would use them to re-roll a failed test. They would never really use them for anything else unless I prompted them to first. So, this is what you get into with meta currencies, is that the players already have a lot to kind of think about with their character of what, how their talents work and their skills and their attack profiles and this, that, and the other, what weapons and equipment, and so to tack on this meta currency, the ways to spend them, even with a cheat sheet like I've given them at times, they still don't always look at that. Excuse me, I'm developing a bit of a cough. But so in the last game that I did of this, and with a different set of players, what I did is I just got rid of resilience and resolve altogether, and I moved all of their abilities over into fate and fortune. So fate now does everything that resilience did as well, and fortune also does everything that resolve did, right? So that way you only have one meta currency to track, and it's essentially during the game, it's the fortune points. And again, I gave a little list of all the things that you can do. And Mark says only wimps spend their fate points. I might need them later. Yeah. Okay. So let me break off for a bit of a funny story here. So, many years back, we were playing the Warhammer 40,000 version of this. It was called Rogue Trader. And we had a player that, he had several fate points saved up in I don't know, 3 or 4 fate points. It was plenty, right? And they got into this situation where they were going to be surely killed. And he was so stuck. He literally said, I said, well, are you going to use a fate point here? Because it was going to be an almost certain deadly attack. Yeah. Mark said he had 4. Yeah. And so he says, no, I'm going to save them. And I said, for what? You're going to be dead. And so, it took a bit of explaining and to get it through to this player that, hoarding these with your dead body is not going to do you any good. So anyway, it was a pretty funny little anecdote regarding that. But anyway, back to what I was saying. Even by collapsing the resilience and resolve into fate and fortune, the players still really didn't use them to the extent that they could, and really just kept re-rolling failed tests with fortune points. And so, I would say the fantasy role play is kind of middle of the road for me on meta currencies. It's about as much as I'm willing to do, and even then, it just didn't really work that well with the players. You really need to kind of simplify it. Then we move on into the real monster, in my opinion, and this is all of the Modifius 2D20 systems. Okay, so this is the worst of the worst, if I was going to call it out. Now, don't get me wrong. There are things about the 2D20 system that I really like, and especially with Star Trek Adventures. It can be a really good game. It's made well, and I enjoy it. But the meta currency system in it is almost such a deal breaker for me that it makes it hard for me to enjoy it. And it may just be from my point of view as a DM, right? But so here's what they got. So they have momentum, threat, and determination. They're 3 different meta currencies. Now, the first 2 are the ones that are the most spent at the table in any given night, right? So momentum is a collective pool that all players deal into, essentially. And so when you get an extraordinary successes, when you get excessive successes on a check that you don't need in order to succeed, you can realize those as momentum points that goes into this pool. And then other players can use those momentum points to add more D20s to their roll checks. They can create special trait situations. They can take extra actions and things like that. They can also take momentum for free without it being in the pool by giving the GM threat points. And I'll get into threat points here in a minute. But The biggest problem with momentum is that it's not all spent the same. So depending on the context of how you're playing, the spins change. So if you're on an away mission playing with your characters on a planet or a space station or something like that, the list of things that you can do with your momentum is what I just described, right? And then once you get into space combat, the list of momentum spins changes. So it's a completely different chart list of things that you can do with it. And again, in my experience with this, the players rarely use the momentum other than to just add d20s to their dice pool. They didn't use it for things like increasing damage or getting crits or anything like that, because they have to refer to a separate chart to see what they can do, right? And it just was clunky, right? And then you get to the threat, okay, for that the GM's pool is. Now, when you get this threat by default, you get a certain number of it per scene, and then every time the PCs award themselves another D20, then you get a threat, and then you can spend it as the GM to trigger enemy abilities and hazards and complications and things to throw at the players, right? So here's my problem with that. I'm the DM. I don't need a pool of things to do this with. I just do it. That's my role as the GM. Why do I need a pool of points to do this with? It makes no sense to me. And I'm sure other people can probably explain this and comprehend it. I mean, I comprehend it. I understand it. It's just I don't agree with it. I don't need a pool of points to tell me how to set up an encounter and how to make an encounter challenging or to throw in complications. And I don't want to be limited by it either. You know, if I have no threat points and the PCs are going to basically just have, turn some enemy into a doormat that they just walk over, that's no fun. That's not going to be challenging or exciting for the PCs. So, I really don't like the threat pool. That's my biggest problem. The momentum thing that the players use, whatever, if they want to use that, that's fine. I just don't agree with the threat pool for a game master because it's limiting, right? It limits you, and you feel, when I was running this, I felt constrained, and what I was running was Conan at the time, which was their first 2D20 game. And then as you play, if there's a lot of momentum and threat going around, it's like a casino table with people pulling, momentum chips and me getting threat chips and this, that, and the other, and remembering when to take them out of the pool and all this other kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah, Mark, about time someone nerfed the DM instead of the magic users. Yeah, well, it may not nerf the DM, but it sure does frustrate and complicate the DM. I'll put it that way. And then lastly, there's another meta currency in here, and that's determination. And this is something that individual players have as a pool, and it allows them to do heroic deeds and automatically succeed at checks and different things like that. So, in the 2D20 system, you've got potentially 3 different meta currencies that are in play during a gaming session. So, I've thought about running Star Trek Adventures again, and I've been kind of thinking about how I can overhaul the system to essentially just use momentum and determination, and how to handle that. And I've got some ideas, and I may throw that out there one night on the live stream and just kind of talk through the ins and outs of essentially tearing apart that system and rebuilding it into something that I can be happy with as a DM. But anyway, that we talked about, Warhammer at the first, that's kind of middle of the road. The 2D20 Modifius is, way on the other end of the spectrum for me of too much meta currency. So let's go to what I think is kind of the sweet spot. Torg Eternity. So, Super Draco says, some people want to roll for everything. Whoever heard of a DM having to have dice to trigger enemy abilities? Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. Exactly. So Torg Eternity, this is a very niche genre game. You can be, from all kinds of genres in fantasy, be it fantasy, sci-fi, pulp fiction, all kinds of things. And whether you like the setting or not is kind of irrelevant. I love it personally, but what I want to highlight here is how they handle meta currency and why I think it's so great. So the single biggest one they have is possibilities. Every character has a number of possibilities, and you begin each act of the story with a certain number of possibilities. And depending on some of your talents and things like that, you can start with more than you would normally, right? But those possibilities are just, they're poker chips. And when you get ready to spend them, you spin them to the GM, and what it does is it adds another dice roll to your check. And that's it. That's all it does. So whatever check that you're doing, you decide you want to spend a possibility, you roll it, and it's an adder to your existing check. It doesn't do anything else. It doesn't do any weird abilities. There's no chart to look at. You just spend it, right? And the other one is destiny cards. Typically you have like 4 or 5 destiny cards that are in your hand, and you start each encounter with a full hand of destiny cards. Now, those can be played for a lot of different effects during a combat encounter, but they're cards. So you already know what they're good for because it's printed directly on the card. It tells you what they can do. So the 2 examples I put here is the hero card. So you can play this card as a possibility. You may not spend more than 1 hero card per test, but you may spend it in addition to a regular possibility and a drama card. So what that means is if you want to spend it, one of your chip possibilities, you can do it in conjunction with this card to get 2 adders to your check, right? And the other one I selected was supporter, which says, it does not say to cough, sorry. It says play to add 3 to any other character's total. Supporter may be played after determining the success level of the test. So each one of these destiny cards are very clear cut on how you can use them. You know how it's going to work because it's sitting in your hand. And hi, War Grimes, how are you doing? Yeah, meta currencies is a fun topic. It's sometimes a love or hate thing for me. I have a certain level that I'm comfortable with, and you came in right at the time. Torg is my favorite level of comfort with meta currency. But if you like the topic, make sure and go back and watch it later. You can catch the first 2 slides. But the destiny cards are played during the encounter, and they are laid out on the table because you know which ones that you have available to you. You can decide when you want to spend them. You know what they're going to do. And the other cool thing is that you can trade them with another player. So if you're in a situation where somebody else's card may be more effective to what you're doing than what you have, you can trade 1-to-1 with another player and get their card. They can also, there are some cards that you, like supporter, that you can play for someone else. But anyway, this is to me the one of the greatest ways to do meta currency because it's not ambiguous as to what they do, and it doesn't negatively affect the GM's ability to craft the encounter or the story. And it usually has a meaningful yet not overpowering impact on what's being, the problem at hand, right? Because you don't want a meta currency to just completely overwhelm your player action in some way or another. You want it to complement it, and that's what this does. So, if I was going to do a meta currency, the card thing is probably one of the best ways, in my opinion, to do it. In pairing that with the possibility tokens that you can spend that only does one very specific thing, great way to do it. But I'm open to other people's ideas of meta currency and how they want to use it in their games. I just don't want it to detract from the core play of the rules, right? Wargrimes says, maybe my view on that is a bit skewed to the extreme because I was just listening to Bacon talk about 4D immersion. What do you mean by that? What would you say is 4D immersion? But yeah, there are a few games that also, like Savage Worlds does Benny tokens. Those are pretty. That's a meta currency. They're pretty easy. They do a very predictable thing, and they don't get in the way of stuff too much, right? But the worst offender to me, like I said, is the 2D20 system. But yeah, Borg, I'll check out your response. I'll come back to it whenever you come back up with it. But yeah, okay. Let's see. It says in this case, most particularly, the concept of flow immersion being protected by removing as many barriers and filters between immersive role playing and the player. Yeah, that's kind of my take on it too. Is not getting in the way of the flow. And that's a good way of putting it. I'm glad you brought that up because that's a perfect way of putting it is, not interrupting the flow of the game. The Torg system does not. In fact, I would go so far to say that the meta currencies in Torg enhance the flow of the game because the players start playing off of each other's cards and they get into a rhythm there of using them to craft their tactics, right? Daryl says, I can't rewind, not sure what I missed. Interesting topic. Yeah, so that's interesting that you mentioned that. This is a little bit of inside baseball, but I was trying to improve the latency on my live stream to make it so that I see that you guys, your chats quicker. It's not like a big delay. And one of the things I had to disable was the DVR function of the live stream. So if you want to watch it, you'll have to wait until the stream's over and then you have to fire it back up again. So, y'all tell me, is it worth it? Would you rather have the DVR feature and have a little bit of latency in the chat, or would you, or do you like having a more real-time conversation? No, don't worry. Don't worry about the interrupting me. That's what I want. I really like that. That's really why I wanted to start doing this. Doing live streams all together is so that I could build a community and have exactly these kind of conversations. Yes, I wouldn't be pestering him right now if I could catch up to see what he said at the beginning of the topic. Yeah. Okay. So maybe so. Next time I'll turn the DVR feature back on, and that way people that are watching can jump back and do it. So Mark says I'm good with a bit more latency if it helps everyone else. Yeah. Warg says, but I'd be tempted for the sake of killing latency if I was in your shoes. Yeah, for me, it's good to have real time conversations because it's that way I'm having a discussion about the topic at hand rather than 5 minutes ago, right? But watching a lot of live streams myself, I do understand the value of being able to jump back and see stuff earlier. But I'll for next time I'll turn DVR back on. But as far as if the topic is interesting to you, please after I'm done here, jump back and catch this if you can. Super Draco says you should DVR. Yes, sir. Warg says, I actually come to you from Vietnam. Anything to kill latency is gold to me. Oh, wow. Gosh. Okay. Well, welcome from Vietnam, I guess. Thanks for joining in. But anyway, that's my take on meta currency. Hopefully you find it valuable and interesting. Undersea cables and government interference. yeah, no kidding, right? Gotta love the what is, I guess where you're at would be the Trans-Pacific cable. Mark says, "Wow, Warg wins the longest distance caller for tonight." Well, I don't think I guess unless you're on the moon, it can't be any further. I think Vietnam is exactly on the other side of the planet, right? But you guys have provided some pretty valuable context as far as this discussion tonight. So I do appreciate it on the meta currency stuff. And hit me up in the comment. If you guys that came in late and you watch it again, rewatch it over again, hit me up in the comments and let me know your thoughts. Once you've seen my whole take on it, because I'd love to hear what you say about it. I'm just one guy, right? Says, I don't know anything about Torg, but cards as meta currency seems like it would be a card game first and in character play second. The seeing through character eyes being brought to you through the cards. Yeah. Yeah, through the cards instead of the other way around. Yeah, so I agree with you, Ward. Whenever I first was looking through Torg, keep in mind that this came out, the first version of it, back in the 90s, right? And that's where I first picked that up and started getting into it. And at first blush, the cards do seem like might seem like you're playing a card game, but they flow so well with the mechanics of the regular game itself that you kind of lose sight of that as you're playing it, especially if you're really into the flow of the action that's happening at the table. The cards are so specific in scope that you just quickly throw them out there, and I'll give you a specific instance. We had a guy that he played a superhero at the time, and he was trying to it was a narrow pathway over a volcano, right? And one of the players fell off in a combat, and so he jumped over and used his flying ability to try to catch the falling the other falling PC. And on his own, he was not going to be able to do it. So he used a possibility out of his pool. He played. He had a hero card in his hand, and he had some other card in his hand that didn't apply, but somebody else had a hero card. So he swapped them for the hero card, and then somebody else had this supporter card. And so between the possibility and the hero and the supporter card, and he rolled just high enough, and he managed to do it. And the table erupted. Everybody had a good time. Man, it was hoorahs and cheers because he managed to hit the impossibly high number, right? So it played well. It did play well at the table. And that's just one example of many. The cards really facilitated a very cinematic style of play at the table. I would encourage you to try it sometime if you haven't. Mark says, on meta currencies, how do you ensure they stay meaningful to the players to get the big results without becoming too dependent upon them? I like cheating death and landing a critical blow at the clutch moment. Well, yeah, so we've talked about Torg, but setting that aside and talking about some of the others, really the players, especially in like the 2D20 system and to a lesser degree in Warhammer, to get the most out of them, the players really need to understand the rules behind it. You can't really just show up at the table and just have a very basic knowledge of what they're used for. You have to understand the choices on the momentum charts and the different ways that you can spin them. That's really the only way you're going to be able to get what you need out of it, right? Borg says, yes, and in comparison, heroic stuff from a rules light or 40 immersive style, while unsupported by the gameism, people just do whatever they want with their own increased agency instead. Yeah, those hurrah moments just don't end up meaning anything. Yeah, I do see what you mean. That's the problem that I've got with those more narrative story type games is, since you're really just kind of talking a story rather than having a mechanic to simulate what's going on in the background, then those big moments aren't really there, because you don't have the mechanics as a threat behind the scenes to fight against. So if you don't have a target and something that you've got to react to from a rules mechanics point of view, then it's really hard to feel satisfaction over those big moments, right? A resource spent by the Daryl says, a resource spent by the player or GM which affects the game but has no diegetic in-world abstraction or analog. Whoa, that's like big word stuff. me no speak. Yes, gameism over diegetic. Wait, are we talking about Scientology? Is this Dianetics? Is that what you guys are talking about? I don't know. The immersion, the diegesis, is where so much more of the joy of actual role playing comes from, in my opinion. Some of you guys are going to have to tell me what this diegetics or diegesis is. It sounds like a medical condition. The game is like sugar to the metabolism. I freaking did something when the consequences of failing would have broken it all. Yeah, well, I do understand that. That's the moment of thrilling victory, right? It's like the old Wide World of Sports, if you're old enough to remember that from on ABC. The little intro of it at the beginning. It's the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, right? That's I think that's what we're talking about here. Diegetics, the story of it with agency. Okay, I see. Okay, so you're talking, yeah, all right. So I think I understand what you mean now. It's not just the story, but you have agency behind it that is backed up with something out of your control, which is a roll of the dice. If I hear what you're saying correctly. I think maybe Bacon would put that moment of victory as a player experience where the in-character stuff is immersive RP. Yeah, I agree. Daryl says, example, diegetic sound originates from the film's world and can be heard by the characters, while non-diegetic sound is external to the story and not heard by the characters. Oh, okay. All right. So I think you're creating a separation between how the characters feel in game versus how the player feels in accomplishing something, I think is what I'm understanding here. but yeah, that's much more like how Bacon would put it, Daryl. Okay. Well, anyway, guys, that's what I've got for meta currencies. I don't think I can get into the diegesis of it. I'm just a regular high school grad, so I don't know that I can comment to that. But Daryl says, so generally 4D players consider meta currency to be non-diegetic. Bacon goes at it through academics pretty hard. Well, unfortunately, I can only give you the experience of a 35-year game master here, not through an academic profile. But hopefully you'll find something interesting on it from this end. But I'm going to have to check out this Bacon person y'all are talking about. Well, guys, that's going to wrap it up for me tonight, unless there's anything else anybody else wanted to touch on. Warg says, Vaults, we're not here for the expectation of PhD. Well, that's good, because you're not going to get it. You're going to get talking about just raw experience. Yeah, well, thank you. And it's not just me, right? That's why we're trying, I'm trying to build a community here is, it's not just about what I think, it's about hearing you guys' perspective and see, look, I learned something tonight. I learned all about Dianetics. So we're all learning something here, right? And, everybody's going to bring a fresh perspective to things. Debt, who you've seen commenting here, is one of my in-person players, and he's a long-time game master himself. So, he brings his own perspective to things, and I do, and everybody does, right? Daryl says there's a free PDF on DriveThru that explains what 4D is. I'll have to check that out. That might be some good bathroom reading. Yeah, the theory in a nutshell is that if you filter the RP through the game system, then there's more distance between players and the perspective they are wanting to immerse in. Yeah, I can see that. Well, that kind of goes to the argument between OSR type games and others. So a lot of the newer games use mechanics to deal with a lot of the things that in the OSR used to be done just by players themselves. Like, so take for instance, going through a dungeon and dealing with traps. In the old school, in the OSR, you dealt with that not with a roll, you dealt with that by the equipment that you had and your own ideas as a player on how to detect and deal with disarming a trap. But in these modern days, it's resolved with a roll of the dice. Now, personally, I think it needs to be a little bit of a mix of the two, right? It's a little anticlimactic to have, a big fancy trap that's, disabled with a D20 roll. But at the same time, it's a little, to me, meta playing a little bit to that you as a person in 2026 would understand every in and out of how to disable a pressure plate trap, whereas your character necessarily may not. Guys, I apologize for all the coughing tonight. I don't know what's tickling my throat. Borg says, but of course that's just from me. Their theory is much more precise and particular and established in the structure of how it is a theory and how it's not. I still haven't finished their book. That mix is still what I'm chasing in RPGs. I still like the gameism enough not to just accept 4D as my Lord and Savior. Yeah, well, that's right. We are playing a game at the end of it, so it's it really just boils down to your table. Do the majority of your players at the table like resolving that stuff with a die roll and making it making your characters shoulder the whole burden of whatever the encounter situation you're in, or do they like putting their own spin on it and being able to think through it as a puzzle for the player to solve. Everybody's going to be different. Your mix at the table is going to be different, and so you as a GM just need to tailor what you're doing so that the people that you're playing with have a good time. Regardless of how you feel about the theory. Now, what I will say is, during convention games, you're going to have to show up at the table with an idea of how you want that to play out, right? So if you're running a one-off at a convention or at a game store or something like that, then you kind of need to decide how you like to do it and, run the game in that method as you're playing. So, there's different ways of skinning that one. Well, guys, we're running up on an hour, so I think I'm going to probably call it a night here. I do encourage you, if you had a good time on the discussion tonight, to jump back and view that after the video posts. I apologize about not having the DVR stuff on, and I'll turn it on for next time. That way you can jump back and catch up if you want to. But having said that, I really did enjoy having the live discussion here on this tonight. It's the first time that we've had enough people on to have kind of a good back and forth. So I appreciate it. It was fun, and hopefully you guys will come back on Tuesdays and Fridays and join in. No. So Ward's saying, sorry for making your chat all about. No, don't be sorry. I appreciate the discussion. It's fun. It's what we're here for, right? It's not, I don't want to just sit here and be a talking head. That's boring as hell. So do come back. Do bring your thoughts. Do bring your opinions, because I want to hear it and I want to talk about it. So anyway, hopefully you guys will join me back next Tuesday, or if not, next Friday. And I think I'm going to probably try to get in a standalone video over the weekend. So anyway, thanks for being around. Thanks for being my audience. And if you had a good time, subscribe if you haven't already, and give me a like if you enjoyed it. So y'all have a good one. Have a good weekend of gaming, and good night.